worked as a 911 dispatcher for 12 years, 7 of them on the night shift. After that long, you start to think you've heard everything. Drunks, domestic disputes, panicked voices struggling to find the right words after a car crash. It all becomes a kind of white noise, a rhythm of human suffering that you learn to live with without letting it get to you. You have to. It's the only way to stay sane. The first call came on a Tuesday about 3 months ago. 2:47 a.m., the quietest hour of the quietest night. A line lit up on my console, but it wasn't a normal call. Not a cell phone with GPS data, not a landline with a registered address, just a raw signal labeled unregistered VoIP connection. Unusual, but not unheard of. I answered. 911, what's your emergency? Static. A thick, wet sound, like listening to a radio underwater. The speaker crackled and hissed, and beneath the noise, I could barely make out a faint whisper. Hello? Can you hear me? It was a child's voice. A boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old. It sounded like he was trying to speak without moving his lips. This is 911, I repeated, speaking louder. I can barely hear you. Can you speak up? The static grew stronger, nearly drowning him out. He came back. A pause. The man in the mask came back. A cold shiver ran down my spine. The professional kind. The kind that tells you this isn't a prank. Okay, son, where are you? I need your address. Mom's heard. His voice broke with a sob. The static now sounded like a swarm of angry insects. Dad's on the floor. He isn't moving. Son, I need you to tell me where you are. I can't send help if I don't know your location. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I tried to trace the call. Error. No location data. No subscriber information. Nothing. The old house, he whispered. His voice was fading. At the end of the street. Please. And then the connection disappeared. No click. No dropped line. It simply stopped existing. 1 second it was there. A stream of static and terror. The next. Nothing. Even without an exact address, the words, the old house at the end of the road, were enough. On the western edge of the county, there's a long dirt road that winds deeper and deeper into the woods. At the very end of that road stands a house. A large, abandoned Victorian mansion that has sat empty for as long as anyone can remember. It was a local legend. The kind of place kids dared each other to visit just to prove they weren't scared. I dispatched a patrol unit. About 15 minutes later, the senior officer, a man who had been on the force since before I was born, radioed back. His voice was calm, carrying the irritation of someone who felt his time was being wasted. Dispatch, Unit 12 is on scene. Property is clear. No signs of forced entry. The building is boarded up. Nobody's here. And judging by the condition of this place, nobody's been here for at least 50 years. 10-4, Unit 12, I replied, careful not to let any confusion slip into my voice. Are you sure? The caller was a child. He said his family had been attacked. A sigh crackled through the radio. Look, there's an inch of dust on the front porch. The boards on the windows are nailed shut. If anybody's in there, it's ghosts. We're clearing the call. And if your prank caller calls back, tell him this isn't funny. I logged it as a false alarm and tried to put it out of my mind. Just a prank. Maybe a pretty sophisticated one, using some kind of voice changer and a spoofed VoIP signal. Kids these days probably know how to do that. I was too tired to think much more about it. A week later, at exactly 2:47 a.m., the same line lit up again. The same static. The same frightened, whispering voice. He's in the house. I can hear him walking. This time, an icy knot formed in my stomach. Son, was that you who called last week? A muffled sob. He's wearing a mask. The one with the scary smile. Mom is screaming. Through the storm of static, I thought I could hear it. A woman's scream. High-pitched, thin, and distorted, as if it were being played backwards. I'm sending help, I said, my voice trembling. Stay on the line. Can you hide? Abe? In the closet, the boy whispered. He's coming up the stairs. I can hear his footsteps. The connection died. This time I sent 2 patrol units. I told them it was a repeat call. Possibly a hostage situation. I didn't want them treating it like a prank, and they took it seriously. They secured the perimeter, used a loudspeaker, forced the front door open. The result was exactly the same. An empty house. A thick, untouched layer of dust covering every surface. Rotting floorboards, peeling wallpaper, the smell of mold and damp wood. No footprints, No child, no man in a mask, no sign that a single person had set foot inside that house in the last 10 years. The next morning, my supervisor pulled me aside. He was a large, patient man with the tired look of someone who had already seen everything life had to offer. He told me to let it go. "It's a glitch," he said, avoiding eye contact. "Some kind of crossed call from another jurisdiction, or a recurring electronic echo. Don't waste county resources on it. If it comes in again, log it and move on." But I couldn't. The boy's voice, it was too real. The fear in it was primal. You can't fake that. Not even the best actor in the world could imitate the voice of a child listening to his mother being murdered in the next room. The calls didn't stop, every Tuesday. Like clockwork, 2:47 a.m., and every call was another piece of the same horrifying puzzle. "He's hurting Dad. There's so much red. Mom stopped screaming. He's looking for me. I can hear him opening the doors." Every time I sent a patrol unit, and every time the result was the same, nothing. The officers grew more irritated with every call. I became the boy who cried wolf. My supervisor issued me a formal warning. My coworkers started giving me strange looks, whispering when I walked past. They thought I was losing my mind. Maybe I was. I stopped sleeping well. On my days off, I found myself staring at the clock, my heart pounding whenever 2:47 a.m. drew near. And somehow, the silence was worse than the calls. I became obsessed. Instead of sleeping during the day, I started spending my time at the county records office. I needed to know who had owned that house. The records were a mess. The property had been bought and sold countless times, passed between banks and holding companies. But I kept digging. Dusty ledgers, faded deeds, boxes of forgotten paperwork. Eventually I found them. The last family who had lived there. A document from 1968. A normal, happy family. A mother, a father, 2 children, a boy and a girl. But that wasn't enough. I began spending my days in the basement of the library scrolling through decades of newspaper archives on an old squeaking microfiche machine. The stale smell of paper and dust filled my lungs. I searched for anything connected to that house. Anything connected to that family. For weeks, I found nothing. Just property tax notices, school honor rolls, the ordinary traces of ordinary lives. Then I found it. An article published on a cold, late autumn afternoon in 1975. The headline was blunt: "Local family slain in home invasion." The blood drained from my face. With trembling hands, I adjusted the focus and zoomed in. The photograph was grainy and black and white, but it was the house. The same steep gables, the same wide front porch. Police cars scattered across the overgrown lawn. I read the article, my heart hammering in my chest. The husband, wife, and their 10-year-old daughter had been found dead inside the home. The exact cause of death wasn't disclosed. The article used phrases like severe mutilation. The police report mentioned a possible intruder. A neighbor claimed to have seen a figure running into the woods, a tall man wearing a white mask. But it was the final paragraph that stole my breath. The family's 8-year-old son remains missing, the report stated. Evidence suggests the child hid inside an upstairs closet during the attack, but he was never located. A statewide search is currently underway. Authorities have not ruled out the possibility that the child was abducted. The case was never solved. The man in the mask was never found, and nobody ever saw the little boy again. I leaned back in my chair. Suddenly, the library basement felt like a tomb. The static, the whispers, the closet, the man in the mask. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a glitch. Was I listening to a ghost? The next day at work, I felt broken. I walked into the dispatch center like a zombie. The hum of the server sounded like a funeral hymn. I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. I had to tell someone. I found my supervisor and one of the senior dispatchers, a woman who had worked there for over 30 years, and brought them into the break room. I told them everything. The calls, the time, the empty house, the article I found on microfilm. I showed them the printed copy, the grainy photograph of the house, the headline. I expected them to think I was losing my mind, to tell me to take some time off, but they didn't. They just looked at each other. It was a look I had never seen before, a look of grim, exhausted resignation. My supervisor let out a long sigh and rubbed his temples. The older dispatcher stared at the article, her face pale. "So it started again," she whispered. "What do you mean, started again?" I asked, my voice shaking. "What's going on?" My supervisor lowered himself into a chair. Suddenly, he looked 20 years older. "Kid," he said quietly, I need to tell you about the man who worked here before you." And then he told me the story. The dispatcher who used to sit at my console had been a good man. Smart, dedicated, reliable. About a year before I was hired, he started acting strangely. He became obsessed with a certain address, the old house at the end of the road. He kept sending patrol cars there, insisting he was receiving emergency calls from the property. The officers always came back empty-handed. He started digging through old records. Spent every weekend in the library, became withdrawn, paranoid. He claimed he was receiving calls that nobody else could hear. "We checked the logs," my supervisor said in a low, serious voice. "The system never recorded the calls he said he was taking. We pulled the audio from his console. There was nothing there, just silence. We thought he was having a breakdown, too much stress." The blood drained from my face. "The system," I whispered. "It doesn't record them. They just appear on the screen and then disappear. They never show up in the call history." The older dispatcher slowly nodded. "We know. The exact same thing happened." He told us about the calls. The little boy. The man in the mask. I felt sick. "What happened to him?" I whispered, even though I already knew the answer. My supervisor stared at the floor. "One night," he said, "he answered another one of the calls. We could see him at his console. He was typing a report, then suddenly stopped. He stood up, grabbed his jacket and keys, and walked out without saying a word. The call was still showing on his screen, but none of us could hear anything. All we saw was an open line. What happened to him?" "He drove to that house. The next morning, his car was found parked on the road leading there. The engine was cold. The doors were locked. He was just gone." The room fell completely silent. "The house was searched," the older dispatcher said, her voice trembling. "The police searched the woods, dogs, helicopters, everything. They went through that place from the attic to the basement. They found nothing. No signs of a struggle. No footprints. No trace of him. He simply vanished. Like he was erased from the world." I stared at them, trying to process what they were telling me. "Why?" I muttered. "Why didn't you warn me?" My supervisor laughed bitterly. "How exactly were we supposed to do that?" His voice carried years of frustration. "Hey, rookie, welcome aboard. By the way, that console might be haunted, and the last dispatcher who sat there disappeared without a trace. Don't worry about it." He shook his head. "You would have thought we were insane. We thought he was insane. Until you walked in here with the exact same damn story." He leaned forward and locked eyes with me. "Here's what you're going to do. The next time that line lights up, you do not answer it. If you accidentally pick up the call, hang up immediately. You do not talk to him. You do not listen to him. You terminate the call and clear the line. That's an order. Do you understand me?" For the next several weeks, I felt like a ghost myself. I did my job on autopilot. Every sound, every blinking light on my console, every incoming call. They all made me jump. I dreaded Tuesday nights. I drank coffee by the gallon just to stay sharp, just to stay alert. I thought about quitting. I wanted to walk away and never come back. But where would I go? And then, last night, it happened again. It was 2:45 a.m. I stared at the clock, gripping the edge of my desk so tightly my knuckles turned white. The minutes stretched like hours. 2:46. My mouth was dry. My heartbeat pounded in my ears like a drum solo. 2:47. The lights on my console flashed. Unregistered VoIP connection. It felt like a physical blow. My training, my instincts, every cell in my body screamed at me to answer. A child was in danger. That was my job. But I remembered my supervisor's pale, exhausted face and the story of the man who disappeared. I wasn't supposed to answer. I let it ring. Once, twice. The flashing light burned into my eyes. My hand trembled above the answer button. I couldn't just ignore it. I had to answer. I had to. I pressed the button. 911, what's your... The static exploded into a deafening roar, louder than it had ever been before, and through it came the boy's voice. Not a whisper this time, a scream, raw, broken, a sound made entirely of terror and agony. "He got me! He got me, please! He's taking me! Please, sir, don't let him take me! Help me!" The sound ripped straight through my professional detachment and buried itself deep inside my soul. This was it. The climax, the moment that would repeat forever. The moment the boy was taken, my hand shot toward the keyboard to dispatch a unit. Pure reflex. Years of training. But I stopped. My fingers froze. He's gone. It already happened. This isn't real. The boy was sobbing now. His screams had become desperate, broken pleas. Please. You promised. You said you'd send help. Don't leave me. Tears filled my eyes. I was a 911 dispatcher. My job was to send help. And I was about to sit there and listen to a child being abducted or murdered and do absolutely nothing. I'm sorry, I whispered. My voice shook. I'm so sorry. I reached toward the end call button. My finger hovered millimeters above the screen. This was it. I was choosing to save myself. I was choosing to abandon him. Then the screaming stopped. Not faded. Stopped. Abruptly, as if someone had flipped a switch. The roar of static dissolved into a low, ominous hum. The line remained open. Silence. My heart stopped. Was it my fault? Then a new sound came through my headset. It wasn't the boy. It was a man's voice. A whisper. Just as frightened as the child's, but older. Rougher. Distorted by the same static. The same swarm of electronic insects. A voice struggling across an impossible distance. Across time itself. And somehow, deep in my bones, I knew that voice. A voice I recognized from an old employee photograph hanging in the hallway, the missing dispatcher. The whisper was barely audible, but horrifyingly clear. He's here. I froze, my finger hovering over the button. The voice trembled with panic. He can see you. Through the line. He's looking right at you. A cold terror washed over me, so absolute, so deep. It felt like death itself. Slowly, involuntarily, I lifted my eyes from the console, across the dark dispatch floor, toward the large glass windows overlooking the night. There was nothing there, only my own reflection staring back at me, my face pale in the glow of the monitors. The whisper continued, one final plea from a place where hope no longer existed. Please, get me out of here.